All right, we're officially in the first sitting week of the new Morrison government for this term, with the parliament to be officially opened, as I said, tomorrow. Joining me now is someone who has forgotten more about these moments of parliamentary history than most people in this building will ever know. And he's a Sky News regular, the Australian's Troy Bramston. Troy, now, you're a former Labor advisor, a speechwriter to a PM, no less. But since leaving the job behind, you've made a real name for yourself as an outstanding writer, or an outstanding, in my view, of the nation's political history. So explain for us some of the importance of today and some of the ceremony around the swearing in of our new Governor-General, David Hurley.
Well, thanks very much, Peter. Look, today was a remarkable day. I mean, it was really a big bipartisan come together of politicians from across the political divide to see the new Governor-General sworn in by the Chief Justice in the Senate chamber. So this was a sort of a quiet passing of the baton from Peter Cosgrove, who at the time was in Admiralty House in Sydney, watching it on television, no doubt probably on Sky News. And there was David Hurley, of course, the outgoing Governor of New South Wales, taking over as the Queen's representative here in Australia. And I thought he was very dignified, very gracious, very humble, said that he was a little bit nervous as he took that oath. And I think Australians got a really good insight into this new Governor-General, who has said he's going to make Indigenous issues, reconciliation a priority, also Veterans Affairs. Of course, he's a former Chief of the Defence Force. He talked about community outreach, and he made a special mention, I think, Peter, also of his constitutional responsibilities, which you would expect, but a lot of people don't truly understand the role of the Governor-General in our system. Not only do they dissolve Parliament, swear in ministers and give assent to bills, but there's an important behind-the-scenes role that they play in advising and cautioning and warning Prime Ministers if they need it, at a government house. And one of the things I did recently was talk to Peter Cosgrove, and I wrote a column about him last week, and I was very interested to hear that he had met with the three Prime Ministers during his time as the Vice-regal representative every 6 to 8 weeks at Government House over coffee or breakfast. And it's an opportunity to sort of talk about national issues, to give some counsel if it's asked, and to sort of see where the government's tracking. So I thought it was good that he made some references to his constitutional responsibilities, which are not always strictly defined or written down. They're based largely on precedent and convention.
I also think they're not well understood, and I think sometimes when people, I have to say, get suckered in, because I'm no fan of Republic, get suckered into the debate on a Republic thinking that we have a system that doesn't have checks and balances, let's say, isn't owned by the Australian people. I think it's because they don't understand what we have, and perhaps if they did a little bit better, if we in this game, you and I, explained it more often, they would be comfortable. We saw that in the revelations that came out last week regarding what would seem a fair pushing and shoving between the Yarralumla, the Governor-General, and the Prime Minister. We don't know what transpired, but we certainly know there were comments made by the Prime Minister about whether or not the Governor-General would swear in Peter Dutton if he was elected by the party room as Prime Minister. Now, of course, when I've spoken to constitutional experts, and you've written about this on the weekend as well, there was no judgment that Peter Cosgrove would have made about the veracity of the Prime Minister's, of the then Prime Minister, would-be Prime Minister Peter Dutton standing. His only constitutional question, does this individual command the House in the Parliament? And of course that was pretty clear, or would have likely been clear, and if not, that sort of question gets tested on the floor of the Parliament. I guess this exposes, doesn't it, Troy, how important the character of whom is chosen as Governor-General is.
Yeah, look, absolutely. Look, I was quite shocked by the revelations that were reported by Paul Kelly initially in The Australian last week, that Malcolm Turnbull had it in his mind that if Peter Dutton was made Liberal Party leader, that there was such a question mark over his eligibility under Section 44 of the Constitution that Peter Cosgrove would not swear him in. even though the Liberal Party, would have chosen him as their leader. And so what this means is that Malcolm Turnbull was suggesting that Peter Cosgrove should preempt the High Court. Now, it is the High Court's role to determine whether an MP is eligible to sit in the Parliament. It is not the Governor-General's responsibility to do that. The Governor-General's only responsibility...
Just let me jump in there. Let me jump in there, Troy. And, of course, at no time did Malcolm Turnbull ever himself seek to refer Peter Dutton. If he had concerns over Peter Dutton, it was within his gift to have him referred.
Yeah, absolutely, and it is the Governor-General's responsibility. It's actually a reserve power that they have to appoint the Prime Minister. He doesn't actually need to take the advice of the outgoing Prime Minister, who would clearly have lost the party room's support in terms of who should be his successor. Now, generally, the Governor-General does take the advice of their ministers, but not when appointing a Prime Minister. So Peter Cosgrove's only responsibility in this situation, as you say, Peter, would have been to appoint the person who had the confidence of the House of Representatives and therefore could guarantee supply and govern with a majority. And so if Peter Dutton was chosen, we would have possibly had a constitutional crisis where Malcolm Turnbull would have recommended that he not be sworn in, and that would have put Peter Cosgrove in a very, very difficult position. But he is such a person of character and integrity and understanding how our constitutional parliamentary democracy works that I think he would have almost certainly rejected Malcolm Turnbull's advice. He had actually been an aide-de-camp to Paul Hasluck back in the early 1970s, late 1960s, and so he understands this. He understands how the system works, and we've had some for the most part, some very, very good Governors-General, and most of them have either got a political background, a military background or a legal background. And a lot of people, including when David Hurley was appointed, have criticised him, saying, oh, well, it's another white man, maybe we should have had a bit more razzle-dazzle in the role and perhaps appointed a woman. But that misunderstands the role and the constitutional responsibilities with it. And I'll just give you this quick anecdote, Peter, that I know that when Paul Keating was making a decision as to who should succeed Bill Hayden, he, of course, chose William Dean, but he was under a lot of pressure to appoint a very prominent woman. But Keating told me that he wanted someone who had a legal understanding of the Constitution, because if they were placed in a situation like the 1975 crisis, they would be able to act with integrity and credibility and do the right thing by the nation. And that is why Keating on that occasion chose William Dean, and I'm sure that other Prime Ministers, for the most part, have chosen someone with those constitutional responsibilities top of mind.
Yeah, look, I think that is absolutely right. I think it comes down to character too. I have to say I had a number of interactions through Government House with Quentin Bryce in her time. She was a Labor appointee. I couldn't fault her observance of all the usual protocols. If you remember, there was some hullabaloo when Bill Shorten was made the Labor leader. There was some concern by some because of the connection through his wife, who is the daughter of Quentin Bryce, whether there'd be some impropriety. Well, Tony Abbott made it clear he felt there'd be no impropriety. There is no impropriety. There was no impropriety, but there were some allegations made. And of course, I think she turned out to be an excellent Governor-General. So I think it's less about gender and more about capability. And I like boring in vice-regal appointments. I think boring is good in vice-regal appointments. Hey, just quickly, the Greens. They didn't turn up to the ceremony today. I think that's quite unusual. There's 9 of them in the Senate, 1 of them in the lower house. There was some rubbishy excuse about a party room meeting, but of course they've known about this for a number of weeks, and surely they can have their party room meeting. There's nothing else to do today. There are no other arrangements today. It's strange to me they didn't turn up.
It's not that strange to me, Peter. You're probably being a little bit too kind to them. Look, I don't think the Greens have the same respect for our system of parliamentary democracy that the 2 major parties do. Look, the Greens, really should have been there. I mean, this is an important occasion, a ceremonial occasion. It's a bipartisan one. It's a good appointment in David Hurley, and they should have been there to respect the office of Governor-General. The Governor-General has a very important role in our political system, spelled out in the Constitution, critical part of the executive in terms of chairing the Executive Council as the Queen's representative, and it was just insulting for them not to be there. They could have had a party room meeting this afternoon or this evening. They only needed to be there for an hour or so. I mean, I helped cover it here on Sky News this morning. It didn't actually go for that long, and they should have been there in the chamber.
Troy Bramston, I watched your coverage today. It was excellent. Thank you very much for being on the show tonight for my viewers as well to go through what's been an historic day. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Peter.